RTHK Radio 3.
You're listening to Brunch with me, Noreen Mir, on this Thursday morning. Now, let's turn to our next topic and guest of today. In the next 20 minutes or so, we're tackling two critical topics that deeply resonates with young people. Toxic masculinity and also the trad wife phenomenon. Now, you may have heard us discuss toxic masculinity briefly in the last episode with our guest, Quratulain Zaidi. So toxic masculinity often refers to the pressure that young men conform to, the sort of to the definition of strength and dominance. And the trad wife phenomenon sort of suggests for young women a more traditional gender role. So we'll be tackling all sorts of topics in the next 15 minutes or so with clinical psychologist Dr. Quratulain Zaidi. Quratulain, welcome back on the program and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are also live this morning on Facebook. I'd love for our listeners to join us there. Noreen Mir on RTHK Radio 3. Perhaps we'll start off with the definitions and perhaps when you sort of came across these terms in your career, Dr. Zaidi. Let's start with toxic masculinity. What does it sort of look like today and what's your understanding of it?
So the definition of toxic masculinity is where it refers to a collection of offensive, harmful beliefs and tendencies, behaviors rooted in traditional male roles, but taken to an extreme. And it is a dangerous idea of manliness, which perpetuates dominance, homophobia, aggression, and it can be harmful to mental health of all genders. It is basically, it appears in research as well as in pop culture, around three core ideas. Toughness, that men should be physically strong, emotionally callous, and behaviorally aggressive. Anti-femininity, which is men should reject traditionally feminine behaviors, such as showing emotions, accepting help. And that's perceived as any kind of weakness, even asking for help. And power, men should work towards obtaining power, status, social and financial, and that is what's going to give them the respect of the others. So it promotes the idea that real men, real men treat their bodies like machines. They need little sleep, they work out even when they're injured, push themselves to physical limits. So, I mean, that's an example of, where this idea is leading to. And women by far are, a lower kind of figure in their lives, or it is a transactional kind of relationship with them. So that's the current definition of toxic masculinity.
I think I've seen a meme sort of when you mentioned social media. I've seen a meme before where it was quite a manly looking man for all purposes of this discussion, and he sort of had a handful of bees trying to eat it, and I think he was, and then the meme said, real men don't eat honey, they eat bees. It was sort of to reinforce that. I know it was very odd. I'm not sure how that made it onto my social media, but it did, probably because I was researching this. Exactly. It could be quite an interesting T-shirt. And I feel like these sort of harmful stereotypes that you mentioned are sort of reinforced via social media. I want to sort of talk a little bit more about, the influencer culture. What about influencers like Andrew Tate gaining traction? How do you think, people like him, and how do you think their messages are sort of shaping or redefining masculinity for young men?
It's quite dangerous, isn't it? And I was thinking about this because I knew that we were going to speak about this, and how strongly I feel about, especially our children being able to have their world view being defined through digital media and influences. And this is a prime example of that, where young men frequently encounter messages which are encouraging dominance, wealth accumulation, emotional detachment, and objectification of women as markers of success and status. And online platforms almost create an echo chamber that validate and reinforce these narrow definitions of masculinity. And if that's the only exposure these young boys and men are having to what it is to be like a man, then how dangerous is this? What is that next generation looking like? And what is that society going to be like where these young boys are going to grow up to be men? So, it is absolutely having a huge impact on young men's identities, where it is potential alienation from positive, emotionally healthy role models and relationships, and increased susceptibility to extremist ideologies which exploit and feed on their insecurities and frustrations. Increased pressure to prove oneself, like it isn't tough enough being a young person in this day and age with all the access that we have, and then this is what you have to be as well. It's just a really, really scary place. You asked me when was my first kind of exposure to this, and I think it was through when my son was about 3-4 years ago, and there were discussions that were happening on the dining table around Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, and he was aware of it. He was aware of these people, and it doesn't surprise me anymore, because if I have to, anything that I come across, they are more aware of these things than I'm exposed to, because I don't have time to be on Instagram as much. But that's their first port of call to be able to access all kinds of materials. And if you are not able to have these conversations with your children and not able to bring them up, it can be quite a scary place. You wouldn't, I mean, these people won't be invited to my dining table, but they are in my son's hand,
they're in their ear. I mean, if you're listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, they're literally speaking in the ears of the young people.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And this skewed perception of what it means to be a man is prevalent. I mean, we're seeing it in all sorts of platforms and whatnot. And I remember what triggered this discussion. It was last time when we were speaking, Dr. Zaidi, we were talking a little bit more about adolescence and sort of the impact of that and the whole concept of the manosphere. And then we sort of talked about, well, what about the other side of the coin? What about the impacts of young girls? And it's exactly what we were talking about, this sort of skewed perception of what it means to be a young man, what it means to be a man in this world. How do these narratives then impact the young girls in the world and the women, actually?
Yeah, but again, it's definitely having huge impact on self-worth, because girls, if they internalize messages implying through the society, or through this, or it's being amplified and validated through this, that their value lies primarily in their physical appearance and ability to please or attract male attention. Can you imagine that that's the only thing that you are your value add is in society? I mean, I can't even think, as I was preparing for this, just being minimized to this for your 100 years of life on this earth. I mean, that is a very scary place. Exposure to these narratives definitely can lead to lowered self-esteem, body image issues. I mean, they are prevalent anyway. But this kind of expectation to be a certain way and to be a please or attract men's attention, obviously increased anxiety about not meeting unrealistic standards, which is promoted by certain male influences. Absolutely, absolutely. And the dynamics, unhealthy relationships, believing that dominance, aggression, or emotional detachment from your partner is normal or acceptable. My goodness, what a scary, lonely place to be in a relationship. Why would you even want to be in a relationship
Exactly.
where you're just an object, and you don't have any value add, and your needs are never going to be met emotionally, and you're never going to be validated for who you are? I mean, that's just not a healthy place to be.
So my next question is going to be even worse, if it can get even worse. Sorry, Dr. Zaidi. So apart from this whole toxic masculinity thing that's been dominating social media, there's another phenomena, which is the trad wife phenomena. And for some of our listeners who may not be so familiar with trad wife stands for traditional wife. And it's this whole sort of surge of young woman. I think it started off maybe for some people as a joke, but some people take it very literally. They're dressed as sort of 1950 housewives in aprons, and they're baking cookies, they're preparing dinner, and they are really sort of taken on the traditional role of a quote unquote woman, staying in the home, providing for the family, looking after the home. There's a real surge of it. And some young woman, that's their aspiration. They aspired to be a trad wife. What are your thoughts on this? Have you seen sort of these videos on social media of the trad wife phenomenon?
First time I came across that term was when it was mentioned in a conversation again by my children a few months ago, and I had no idea that this is what was going
Not
on
under my
outside.
watch that this is happening.
This is a good thing, right? Because that dining table and those dinner times are just so important to have, I feel, as a family, because I learned so much because I wasn't aware of this phenomenon. I mean, look, I have to say this, that personal choice and autonomy has to be respected.
Yes.
Absolutely. My concern is that when this phenomenon is it's almost a romanticized version of what a woman's role is in society. And not only that, but it is a universally desirable role, and it is somehow superior. That when you're doing this, when you're choosing to do this, it does then reinforce restrictive gender norms. Now, I have, come up or grown up in a generation where, we have worked really hard towards getting equal pay, being recognized for the work that we do, being able to be published, as one of the main publishers in the peer-reviewed journals, being able to be acknowledged for the work that we are doing, as well as being able to run a home and be able to have a choice of having children, family. But you don't have to choose one or the other. Again, I would say it is not about choices. It is about being able to project that this is something that is somehow superior, and it does then limit a young woman's vision of their own potential, discouraging them from pursuing careers or ambitions outside traditional housemaking roles, because that is somehow superior and that's what is valued.
100%. Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Zaidi. I think it's all about choice. I think it's all very well that we're two working women sort of saying, oh, trad wives. This is not it at all. To be honest, the more research I do, the more I think, wow, this is a wonderful job to have the opportunity to care and look after your family, to make sure all the meals are prepared. It's a beautiful thing. And that's a lovely choice if you're able to make that choice for yourself. It's not about what society projects onto you, that, in order to be a good woman, you've got to be a trad wife, or you've got to, be able to do those things. I think it all comes down to making informed decisions. And I think sometimes when that is all we see on social media, I think it's an echo chamber, as you mentioned earlier. It can really limit aspirations, because if you're a young girl scrolling through, the more trad wife videos you look at, the more comes up, and it can just kind of feel like these are your options, and not really have different ambitions that you could have in your life. You can be a great wife and have a career, for example.
Agreed. And so none of this comes up on my Instagram feed, by the way. The algorithm hasn't caught on.
I like the way I said, for the sake of research, secretly I've been like, oh yeah.
No, but look, just would I be a satisfied, fulfilled human being just being just having the trad wife role in my life? I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't be a good human being because that part of my the fulfillment that I get from my work, there is that. It's a very different part. It doesn't mean to say that being a mother or being a wife or being a daughter, that traditional gender role hasn't been fulfilling, but that has never been enough for me. So that would have not been my
It's
choice.
like trad wife minus cooking and cleaning. That would that would what it says on our CV.
Yes, and look, I cooking and baking, cooking and feeding people is definitely something that is very stress relieving for me. So I enjoy
Yes.
doing
Oh,
that.
okay.
However, yeah, but however, I have somebody who is able to then help me, manage that as well. So I'm lucky enough with that. But the thing is that it wouldn't be enough for me. It wouldn't be fulfilling enough for me, and I think it is dangerous to be able to put that on young girls that this is uh, your role and this is what is going to be satisfying for you. They should have a choice.
Yeah.
And again, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. However, to me, it feels like that reinforcing gender inequality by subtly suggesting women's primary value lies in caregiving, homemaking, supporting male authority, potentially undermining progress in gender equality and women's empowerment. I have an issue with that.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like, that's not the only route. And like having children's not the only route. I would feel almost limited if that's just doing things for the sake of what society is telling you to do. So we talked a little bit more about sort of the fulfillment of various roles. We've got only 3 minutes left. We touched on this. Let's talk about sort of feminism and women's rights. What effects do you think the trad wife phenomenon, how is it sort of affecting conversations around feminism and women's rights?
Um, the trad wife movement, I feel, could lead to polarizing conversations around feminism,
Yeah.
framing feminism and traditional roles as mutually exclusive rather than complementary choices. And I think that's the fundamentals and the crux of it. And being able to question as I said, I have come from where I was when I started out in my career to where we are now. Again, in the last 6 months, we've taken a step back with gender equality and all kinds of things. However, we had made huge amount of progress. Discussions on choice versus pressure. It is important to be able to talk about genuine autonomy, whether choices are to embrace traditional roles or freely made influence by societal economic pressures. It is important to be able to have that choice. I
And
feel that's
yeah.
very important. Yeah.
It's one of those topics that's super polarizing. All you have to do is just to sort of look at a tradwife post, and you've got all the pros and antis, and oftentimes women and men weigh in. But you'll often see sort of the polarizing nature of some of the comments made by women themselves. Like exactly what you said. It should be about the choices and not from societal pressure. Dr. Quratulain Zaidi, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Remind our listeners once again, have you got a website? Where can we follow you and your work?
Yes, so you can reach me at mindandlife.com, and we have that's where the website is. You have all the information there and great resources on various different topics there as well.
Excellent. Until the next time for more great discussions. I'm looking forward to the next one in a month's time. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Quratulain Zaidi. Thank you very much.